Hello, everybody, and hello, Jack. I've brought my favorite MotoGP test expert back on the podcast again. Great to talk to you. We haven't talked in a while, I believe. Misano was the last time. So, how did you enjoy the winter test? You went to Malaysia and Qatar, if I'm not mistaken. So, how did all the travel go, and did you enjoy it?
Yeah, thanks for having me back on again. Yeah, it went pretty well, actually, not so bad. To be fair, the only hiccup I had really was when I was flying back from Kuala Lumpur after the Sepang test. The poor guy next to me started throwing up as the plane was taking off. So he had a bit of a rough time and I had to look after him for a few minutes. But apart from that, it was all good. That was nice. Really good trip, actually, to Qatar, too. It was my first time in Qatar. Cool place, strange place, but very very cool. And obviously the paddock in the circuit is unbelievable. Like it's a crazy place. It's a fair bit different from my local track back home, Cadwell Park. So a bit of an upgrade on there. But yeah, really good trip. It was good fun.
So, you didn't get the COVID vaccines back in 21 in Qatar?
No, I wasn't there. No, my flatmate Jack Appleyard was there, and he got them luckily. So all good.
And anything with the jet lag? Because I've heard I believe Joe Rogan talked about it, and I listened to a podcast that he said that when you experience a jet lag, you just have to get out of the plane and immediately work out, and that apparently settles it. So, and I never got my ass out of Europe, so I don't know what it's like to have a jet lag. I would like to ask you, how do you deal with it when you fly to the other end of the world?
I mean, I'm certainly no expert on it. I don't do it too often. Appleyard would be better at telling you how to deal with it. But no, I mean, usually I just take like the little melatonin pills,
Okay.
the little gummies that they have for like 1 milligram. They're not that strong at all. But to be fair, going to Sepang, like, I didn't have any jet lag at all while I was there because I think I slept for like maybe 2 hours across the two different flights and then just made sure I stayed up until the night and went to the gym, like as Joe Roberts says, went to the gym and kind of wore myself out and then took a melatonin before going to bed and slept pretty well. So I didn't have anything there. On the way back, like I thought I was okay, but then the second night when I was back in Barcelona, it caught with me and like I think it was like 8 p.m. and I was already asleep. So um, yeah, not too bad. But apart from that, yeah, literally like one day of proper feeling tired and that was it.
Nice. I hope you survived the guy next to you in the plane without throwing up as well.
Yeah, not too bad. He was so unlucky. Literally, as we were just throttling up to go and take off, he just reaches for the bag, the little sick bag in front of him, and just starts very casually throwing up into this bag. And like I was just watching something on the screen already, and I just looked across. I was like, "Oh fucking hell, he's being sick." So poor guy wasn't too well, but thankfully there was a free row at the back of the plane, so the flight attendant took him there for
Okay.
the whole flight, and he just chilled out on his own. And I think by the end he wasn't feeling too bad. He came back to his seat next to me for the landing, and he was feeling fine. But yeah, poor fucker, like
Yeah.
just throwing up immediately as the plane takes off.
I think the smell of puke is one of the most disgusting things you can smell.
Yeah,
So
it's horrible.
normally you get the urge to puke as well, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm quite glad that he was at the back of the plane because, like, when he did come back, like, he smelled a little bit of
Yeah.
sick, but not that bad. So, if I was sat next to him for 6 hours, and he was smelling a sick, I think I
Yeah.
probably would have needed to get up and go for a walk at some point.
But it's just economy class, so you don't have the wall.
Yeah. No, Dorna putting me in economy. I'm not a boss yet, so no business for me.
Maybe they should do it when you do it just twice a year.
It would be nice, but it's a lot of money. So,
Yeah. Is Jack Appleyard commentating Moto 3 again?
I believe, yeah, I don't know the exact plan for commentary pairings this year, but I presume it'll be the same as last year. So
Okay.
he'll do Moto 3. He just did Moto 3, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
just Moto 3.
Because I enjoyed it. He had like a energy to it that was refreshing.
Yeah, he's a good commentator. Like Jack can talk for days, and he's always like random thoughts and waffling away. So
Yeah.
yeah, good commentator for particularly like when it's a free practice and it's boring and you don't have anything to talk about. Jack can find something to
Yeah.
talk about. So he's really good at that.
I think with the interviews, somebody like you makes a better job because as the
That's
interviewer,
interesting.
you need to give the floor to somebody else. And Jack is talking so fast and so much, and that I think commentating
That's
suits him better.
yeah. Well, that's quite interesting because I was literally just chatting to Jack today, and I think my interviews are like the worst thing that I have. Like, I think I need to get a lot better at formulating questions and stuff like that. I always feel like whenever I listen to my interviews back, if I'm watching the rider's answer just to like write down the info, whenever I hear my question, I just think, fucking hell, I sound like a dickhead. But yeah, that's it. Like, Jack's really good at the interviews too, particularly in the race weekends. Because the good thing with Jack is like he just has everything stored up there. Like when the riders come in for interview and stuff, we have like a schedule, and we request riders like based on their performance or interest stories over the weekend. And like I always like write out the rider's name in my notes on my phone, and then just like key points, um, of what happened in their race or during the qualifying or practice session, whichever day it is, just so I can remember, like quickly look down before I do the interview. But Jack like doesn't need that at all. He just remembers everything in his brain. It's like an elephant, really good memory. So
I may be biased with your interviews because we spent so many hours talking. So
yeah,
I got used to your character and your style of talking.
well, I
But
appreciate the good review.
yeah, what you said about Jack and free practice. Also, I think talking to Simon, I had like 2 podcasts with him, and he's as well like you give him a little bit and he starts talking about
Yeah,
so much. He could also talk for hours, and I
yeah,
really, really hope he would be more in the commentating role than in this trackside role. Like when I watched the After the Flag, please tell me, why do you start it when there's 20 or 30 minutes left on the clock? What's the
we
reason
do that
behind
just so you get some live action.
it? Okay.
Obviously, we don't do the preseason test live like a full show like we did in Valencia. Mainly that's because like not all the camera equipment's there yet. We take a limited amount of equipment for the tests, and then everything is freighted later, closer to the time of the GP. But we do it just so you can have some live footage. I think actually because we spoke a lot about After the Flag and like changes we could make to it. We did a small change for the final day, and we showed a bit more like live track action in that first half an hour, the last 30 minutes of the session on the final day, and I think it looked a bit better. But that's like the main reason is just so you see a little bit of live action.
Yeah. What annoys me that in this last 30 minutes of test time, it seems like they're trying to find a spot for Simon where the bikes are the loudest and then put him there.
This is
I,
the trouble.
yeah, I don't know if it was you or Simon, but I remember one of you were in the pit line next to Yamaha, and they went out for the practice starts. It was you? Yeah,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you just hear the bike. So
I
I think this
mean,
is a little bit unfortunate, but
yeah. I like it's so fucking hard because the bikes are so
yeah,
loud, and also like my voice is quite soft and it's not
yeah,
very loud naturally anyway. So like if I'm heard, I have to have the microphone right next to my mouth. So that's partly on me. I need to speak louder, but also like it's just a nightmare for the audio guys
yeah,
because if you
yeah, I
have the
can
mic
imagine.
sensitively way down, then you won't hear me as well. But if it's at a normal level, you just get drowned out by the bikes. So
Yeah.
it's pretty tricky.
I talked with Simon about this a lot, and he says also it's like super tricky because you on one side you need to be in the pit lane to talk and to see with the
Yeah,
guys in the paddock and find out information, but then all of a sudden when you have to talk to the audience, then it's a little bit more difficult to find a quiet spot, and especially
yeah,
if bikes are flying by or if somebody wants to leave. But I think a test would be the best setting to figure this one out, to just do it after the test. But you said about not covering the test. I've read something that you could watch the winter tests for like 25 euros on the video pass, I
yeah.
believe.
So they do like a off-season deal, so you
Okay.
get like all of the test. That doesn't mean that it's like a live feed for the testing. What you
Okay.
see on ATF is that's it. Um, but yeah, you just get all of Video Pass that covers all of the testing for a discounted price. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. But I think during a race, when they when they go to Simon and ask him for his opinion. I think it would be a much better scenario if it would be in the booth, and maybe even have three people there. And if Simon, he said that he isn't really the commentator, he just likes to talk about what he sees and what the technical stuff. And
Yeah.
I think you could find a pairing there that Simon sees the stuff that he sees, and with his knowledge, and all of a sudden he has this super insightful story. And you do this during free practice a lot, but during the races, unfortunately not. So I think watching other sports, it's always great to have like a journalist commentating and
Mhm.
together with an expert. Like when you watch the NFL, they have now Tom Brady for next season, I believe, at Fox. So stuff like this would be nice to have in MotoGP as well. Like, and Simon is so awesome to talk to. He knows so much, and to just have him limited to, let's say, 30 seconds, we just asked Simon about it, I think doesn't really suit his skill set as well. So
Mhm.
I see him more in the commentating booth because he's so eloquent, he's so insightful, and you should really give him the floor to bring this to the people, because he's also super likable. Like, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
to, when we did the podcast, I was sick, and therefore I didn't feel like talking too much. And Simon was the perfect partner, because I just ask him something and he elaborates, and it's so interesting to just sit there and listen to him, you know?
Yeah, no, he's brilliant. I mean, if you get him going on a subject, he won't stop until you actually tell him to stop, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and that for sure is like very well suited to commentary. Um, but the thing with Simon as well is like he absolutely loves just being down in pit lane
Mm.
and looking at the bikes. Like he's the same as me. We above everything else in MotoGP, we really get excited about like the bikes and how impressive they are and all this sort of stuff. So I think if the bosses ever like went to Simon, oh, we want to do a full time commentary role with you, he'd go, oh, hang on, like I want to. When am I going to be in pit lane? You know.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that. Like, but I mean, we'll see what they do this year. I don't know what the commentary plan is, but maybe if they put Simon on more, I'm sure a lot of people would be quite happy about it.
Yeah, of course. And he's also very good at those interviews afterwards.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because I feel like Simon has also a very good balance between his own experience and his own opinion,
Hmm.
and still being very respectful to the other guy,
Yeah.
and because he understands both sides. But is, for example, my favorite example is when KTM said that they won't re-sign Remy in 2021.
Hmm.
And Simon did, I believe, the perfect interview, because he was really pressing Pete Byra on why, because he has the rider's perspective, but still was very, very polite and very structured in his interview. But he wouldn't let him slide with some bullshit excuse, you know? That was one of the best interviews I've ever heard in MotoGP, because it's um, on one hand like pressing the issue, on the other hand not being a dick, you know?
Yeah, yeah. We were actually speaking about, excuse me, about like Simon and his role when we were in Qatar. We were just having dinner and we were chatting about it with the guys. And he was saying, like, obviously he got to 49, 50 years old and knew nothing about the journalist world, you know? And he had to learn it all on the job. Like in his first year when he came in, people hated him because, you know,
I
they were like,
remember.
what is this guy? Like, he's not a good journalist, doesn't ask good questions, doesn't ask the right questions, all this sort of stuff. And now everyone loves him because he's learned so much about what it is to be a journalist. But you still get that natural trait of him where primarily his main viewpoint is as a rider. And then even then, like after being a rider, he was an Öhlins technician and all this sort of stuff. So he knows like kind of two of the three sides in the paddock, like the worker, the rider, and now he knows the journalist. So he kind of has all three now. So when you give him a situation like, as you said with Remy when he was dumped by KTM, he goes from the rider perspective, then he goes from like kind of the team perspective or the organization perspective, but then he also at the same time, like now he's learned that what he should expect from an answer, and if he doesn't get it, he goes again. You know, like he's done pretty well at like such a old age. Old 50 is not old, but at an older age to just learn a lot about a world that he had no idea about until he was that age.
I remember in Silverstone during Moto2 practice, you had Sean Dillon Kelly in the booth It was before all this American racing drama went down.
Yeah.
And I really thought maybe he also has a future because he's very eloquent, and it
Yeah,
seemed
he was
like
great, actually.
he was. I talked to him about it, and he thought, "Oh yeah, I wasn't doing this well." So yeah, but I thought he was great, and I really could see him having like a future in there if he doesn't
Hmm.
want to go racing anymore, and like especially in the second half of the season where he wasn't on the grid. I mean, he had those races with Forward when Escrique was injured, I believe.
Yeah.
Then I believe it was a little bit of a missed opportunity to not quickly get him into the commentary job when he had nothing to do at the races. Like he wasn't going to race. There were no other series where he could race, and now obviously he's in Moto America. But if you could get him back one day, it would be nice because he was very good and also insightful to have like a rider who did it recently, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, he was definitely really good. He was actually really nervous about it beforehand. It was quite funny.
Obviously.
Like he was, yeah, you don't really think that a rider would be nervous just about talking about bikes. You know, we're going to ask them questions about them, about their team, about riding. So like it's bread and butter for them. But he was really nervous. It was quite funny. But yeah, he did a great job, like really great job, as you say. Insightful, spoke really well. He's a really, really nice guy. Um, yeah, but I guess that probably after the whole thing kicked off with American racing and then scrambling to get the forward ride for 3 rounds and then all that, I bet he was just all over the place,
Yeah.
like going and meeting different people to see what he was going to do for next year.
Yeah, that's also true. I mean, it could have confused him maybe to have like a new thing immediately to do and
Yeah,
not
maybe.
focusing on either side correctly because his head is all over the place, understandably. So yeah, I don't know, but maybe in the future.
We'll see. When he retires, we'll ask him.
Yeah,
It'll
good.
be a few years yet.
Hopefully you don't lose him to Moto America commentary.
No, well, it'd be interesting to actually see how he goes in Moto America because obviously, then if he does really well on a superbike, like we saw, obviously Garrett Gerloff come across from there a few years ago to World Superbike, and you know, World SBK at the minute is kind of becoming a more popular avenue for a lot of riders. So yeah, if he's good there, then why not? We'll maybe see him over there in a few years.
He was in the 600 class before he moved to Moto 2, right? And he was
Yes,
champion there, right?
yeah, in Moto America, yeah,
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 and then he went to Moto 2, and now he's on the 1000cc
yeah.
bike,
I
right?
think
Okay.
he's riding a BMW, or I'm not too
Okay.
sure.
In the same team as Bobier?
I really wouldn't know. I can't remember what it was, but I'm pretty sure it's a BMW. But I don't think it's the same team as Bobier because I think he's got PJ Jacobson as his teammate.
Okay. I'm excited for World Superbike, as we talked about it, because now it's Phillip Island this weekend, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And with Toprak doing good at the tests and Jonathan Ray on the Yamaha,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit afraid that we get all this excitement. Yeah, it's gonna be so wild, and then first weekend Bautista just smokes everybody by 20 seconds again.
I mean, there's definitely a possibility for it, but I don't think that'll happen. I'm
I
actually
hope
worried
not.
about the other Ducati, Bulliger. He looks incredible, like really, really
Yes,
strong.
but when I learned one thing, that is rookies don't um when you get somebody on a bike who is very, very fast immediately, I think it's because they're incredibly talented, but there's still so much more to having a successful season that you will
Yeah.
see those glimpses of greatness at some
Mm-hmm.
point, maybe even in Phillip Island when he tested there. But to keep it up consistently over the whole season will be very, very difficult.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, last year he was consistent in World Supersport, but you know that's 140 horsepower compared to I think the superbikes now have 260-ish. You know, so
Yeah,
we'll see how it goes. But so far, he's been like pretty flawless in testing.
yeah.
Actually, the other one, obviously, Toprak, is very exciting. Like my dad
Mm,
works for BMW, and I was speaking to him the other night after the test, and he said like he's incredible. You know, just the way he rides the bike and gets the lap time out of it is phenomenal. So
yeah.
we'll see. I don't know. I did have Johnny down as like my preseason prediction. Like before the first test, I said to my friend Kiko Giles, who works for World Superbike, I was like, I'm going Johnny. I think Johnny's going to be world champ on the Yamaha. But now that the testing is over, I'm suddenly thinking, oof, might be Toprak, you know, he might do it.
You know who I'm going to pick?
You're going to go Remy.
Yeah.
Of
All
course.
day.
Yeah, no
But
surprise.
you remember Pedro when he tested the Moto2 bike for the first time in
Yeah, and was
Portimao,
fastest
and
in
he
that test.
immediately broke the lap record, I believe. And then first 4 or 5 races, he had one mistake every race, I believe. I mean, he had this first lap incident in Qatar, and he crashed in America. I don't know what he did in Argentina, but like it really started to pick up after Mugello and his win.
Yeah,
Then you could see things starting to go together, and I think it's the same with Bulliger.
yeah. I mean, let's see. It's going to be interesting for sure.
Same with Pecco now. He had such a great test that it almost feels too good.
Well, it was the same as last year. He had an incredible test season, and then obviously crashed in Argentina, then crashed again in America, and then it all seemed to be okay for a while, and then it started to unravel a little bit.
But the GP23 was obviously too stable. So is the 24 yet less stable?
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know.
So yeah, I talked with Simon about the 24 bike after Valencia, and in Valencia they obviously just tested the engine, and he said, basically to summarize it, the 21 engine was very good with power delivery. Like the 22 engine apparently had this issue that it was too aggressive, and
Yeah,
the wheel started spinning, and also this moment where you start to initiate the throttle, it would kick the rear tire out because it
yeah.
was too aggressive.
Hmm.
But it had a lot of horsepower, so this was a good part. And obviously, as we all know, they dumped it and rolled the 21 engine. In 22 and 23, they had a more balanced engine, which was better, but they had some issues with braking. And it looks like the 24 engine is now the perfect combination out of these 3 engines. It's smooth, it's good under braking, has a lot of power. And is there any downsides now that we
Um,
discovered in Malaysia and Qatar?
I don't think there's any major like red flag to it. No, like as you say, the 21 engine seemed to be like pretty sweet. It was very nice, and the 22 was a bit too aggressive, and 23 they had the trouble with the inertia on the engine braking. The 24 seems to be pretty like spot on. There's no real major problem. I mean, one interesting thing was Jorge Martin on the second day in Qatar said that he suddenly started suffering with lots of chatter. Chatter's a problem that you get from the rear of the bike, but then it feels like the whole bike is kind of like there's this kind of juddering sensation. Um, and generally, I think on braking, but I'm not 100% sure anyway, or you can get it coming out the corner as well. But then we heard a couple of other small comments, nothing that was like as clear cut as Jorge. Like Jorge said on the day 2 in Qatar that like it was a difficult day because of it, like a real big problem with chatter, and it kind of came out of nowhere. But Enea Bastianini, I forget if it was day 1 in Qatar or the last day in Sepang, I can't remember now. But he said they had a small vibration from the rear, and when he said that, I kind of like didn't really think anything of it because he said small vibration. You're like, okay, nothing too much, maybe just a setting thing that they need to figure out. So then when you hear Martin saying, "Oh yeah, we had this big problem with chatter," you're like, "Okay, where's this coming from? Is it setup or is it related to engine or maybe just I don't know something with a tire?" So yeah, tricky. It doesn't seem as though there's a problem, but maybe there's something just to keep an eye on there if this problem does resurface again. And even if you hear like Pecco complain about it, but so far, I mean, like the 24 engine, for one, it's helped Bastianini a ton. Like he looks unreal again. Like looks like that 22 Bastianini. You wouldn't be surprised if he goes to Qatar for the first race and wins it because he looks incredible. Like, and the big thing that's impressive with Enea is he seems to have really improved on the time attack because he always struggled with that. And obviously, everyone's talking about Pecco doing a 30.9, but Enea was, a 50.9 in Qatar, but Enea was literally there at a 51 flat right behind him. And they both did that lap. Like I was looking at the analysis from their run plan on day 2. And throughout the day, they were just doing like small little race runs, like kind of 5 or 6 laps, whatever, checking different settings and trying different things and whatever. And then as soon as they went, right, let's go for a time attack lap, they both just did it on the first lap. Like, no problem. Like, it was easy. So that's pretty scary on its own. The fact that they go out and just first lap, no problem, click into gear and be a second quicker than they've gone all day, So pretty scary. And it'll be very interesting to see what Anea can do in the long race, because the big thing with him when he was on the 19 bike in his rookie year, and then also when he got on the 21 in 2022, was he was really good with conserving the rear tyre. And that was something that actually in Sepang, we heard that maybe there were some complaints about struggling a little bit with rear grip with the new Ducati later in the longer runs. So we'll see. Actually, it was Anea that mainly commented about that rear grip feeling. Pecco actually said that the rear grip wasn't so bad towards the end of his long run. So we'll see. But I think Anea's going to surprise some people.
Hopefully he will be back, because it would be awesome to have a fight between Pecco and Enea, the one we anticipated since the announcement that he moves to the factory team. And also with Jorge Martin in the mix, it's going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah,
and
sure.
It looks like those 3 will battle it out. And all of them have the new fairing. Like the old fairing was those downwash ducts where the air that comes from the front gets pushed down. And apparently this was very good for maneuverability in the corners and was good for top speed. And last season, Jorge Martin had this belly pan, which obviously is the ground effect thing and sucks the bike to the ground, but makes it more heavy from side to side. And it looks like now they found a hybrid thing of both. Like they still have those downwash ducts and they have this belly pan. So what's the understanding of the new fairing? How does it behave? Where are the strong points? Where are the weak points?
So yeah, it's basically just the best of both worlds, as you say. The downwash ducts, like what we understand from them, is that they work at a larger range of speeds and a larger range of lean angle. So one thing that was really interesting, actually, if you go back to the Valencia test at the end of 22, when Ducati first tried their big side fairings, the big bulged out ones. I remember Pecco like multiple times trying to brake and turn into the corner with those side fairings on when he was testing, without the downwash ducts, and he kept struggling to get it turned into the corner. So, probably the downwash ducts maybe provide a little bit more drag and just helped him to kind of turn into the corner a little bit better and get it stopped for those tight ones. And he like instantly preferred just the downwash ducts over the side fairings. Obviously, Jorge and Johan Zarco last year ran the big side fairings for most of the year until the update came out from Silverstone onwards, and then Martin switched to the downwash ducts again. And so the other thing is those the side fairings, the big ground effect ones, they were a bit like all or nothing. They worked really, really well in the middle of the corner, as they're meant to, because how they work is by only leaving a small gap between the road surface and the surface of the fairing. So then they kind of create a low pressure area, and that's what pulls the bike into the ground. But with that, the faster you go, the better they work. So maybe in the slow corners, you don't really have enough speed or enough time to get the effect of them that strongly. But then in the faster corners, they really, really work well. So then what they've done is just paired them together, get the best of both worlds. The downwash ducts work a little bit better. They're all lean angles and all speeds, and then you still have the real strong effect of those side fairings when you're in the faster corners, lent over all the way. So, quite interesting. Jorge Martin actually said initially that he didn't get on with the new fairing, didn't like it. And then he seemed to kind of make steps and progress each day. I think it was the last day of Sepang where he was really like, okay, we've made a step forward here. I like it. It's definitely better than last year's fairing. But then even in Qatar, apparently there was whispers that he initially was like, I'm not sure about the feeling on the first day. But then by the end of the test, he was definitely like, yeah, no, the fairing's good. So, pretty big progress. I mean, for sure, it must have helped a lot because the lap times those 3 guys on the 24 bikes are doing are impressive.
It looks like the downwash ducts could complement the ground effect area. Like when you imagine that there's a low pressure area, which sucks the bike to the ground, and then you wash the air, which is coming from the front out before it even reaches that there could be a higher low pressure area.
Yeah.
So I think this could be a very, very interesting thing to maybe we see at a Aprilia and a KTM soon.
I mean, for sure. I mean, KTM actually already did this idea of the best of both worlds.
They did it, but they did it, in my opinion, in a very stupid way because the ducts were rubbing on the road and then you had holes inside of it. So it kind of
Yeah,
lost its purpose.
yeah. They were pretty low, and yeah, as you
Yeah.
say, some of them did get damaged. But
It's probably the F1 engineers when they forgot that a bike has lean angles.
yeah, well, you'd hope not. But anyway, you got to ask the question.
Yeah. But back to Ducati, we talked about a new chassis, which is developed by Michele Pirro. And in Misano, I believe we talked about this. And I haven't heard anything since. Is there any updates with the new chassis? Have they thrown it into the bin?
Well, yeah. From what we've seen, it looks like maybe it has been thrown into the bin. But this chassis is really different. Like, and it's been a work in progress for, I think the first time I saw it was in 2021 at the Barcelona test. So it's been a long time. Yeah, it's quite different. It's got like a load of cutout areas, and you would look at it and think, how is this thing even kind of strong enough, to sustain the forces? But obviously it is. Yeah, we didn't see it at all during Sepang and Qatar Test. I mean, or at least we didn't see it. Maybe it was out there for a very, very brief run and it was tested once, but I don't believe it was. I think it's gone. Perhaps it's gone behind the scenes and they're like completely reworking it, and maybe we'll see it appear again with Pirro at a test during the season, but I don't think it will, to be honest. In terms of chassis stuff, the only thing that I saw was back in Valencia. They had two very, very minorly different chassis. Literally just where the swing arm pivot is, just at the back of the chassis. If you look from the bike behind, there's some small cutouts in the cross section, and they're like hollow, only a small area. But literally, like the only thing that changed was like there was two small cutouts in one, and in the other it was slightly bigger, but overall a little bit smaller. Like minimal thing.
It's very interesting because I talked with Simon about it, and he asked Tadozzi, and Tadozzi apparently said that it's the same bike, just the engine is new as the 23. And yeah, I was under the impression that Ducati only tested the new engine in Sepang. Not in Sepang, in Valencia, I'm sorry.
Well, I have the photos of the different chassis. So, I mean, like when you say different chassis, literally every single thing, like 99.9% of the chassis looks the exact same, apart from these two very small things. So, I mean, you can kind of forgive him for saying that they're not really testing anything because it probably made no difference. So.
Going back 1 year to the GP23, why are those riders at the moment a lot faster than they were in than Pecco, basically, and Jorge Martin were last year on the GP23? Is it just that conditions now are better in Malaysia and Qatar, or are there different reasons?
Definitely conditions. Yeah, like whenever we go testing, obviously it's it's an open pit lane for 8 hours during the day. So you have 8 hours of track time where that's putting down rubber. And in Sepang, we didn't have any rain apart from the first day, I think. There was like a small little bit of rain in the afternoon on the first day, but not even much. Like it was fine. So you literally had like 3 days where there's just constant Michelin rubber going down on the track. And whenever you have that buildup of Michelin rubber, it just makes the track so much grippier than what it is when you first go. So you get a lot more track time in a test day than you would do in a regular day in a GP weekend. And then obviously with more rubber down, more grip, the track conditions are much faster. They were saying that probably in Sepang, the track conditions were between half a second and 3/4 of a second faster than what you would have in a GP weekend. So there's that. And the same then in Qatar. We reckon it was kind of 3-4 tenths quicker, maybe half a second faster in Qatar. So definitely that. The other side of it will be, just because they have the same bike doesn't mean they're doing the same stuff electronically as last year. There'll be small things that Ducati will have learned with that bike, and now they understand, and particularly after testing with the 24 and testing electronic things with that, they'll go, let's try this with the old bike and see if it also works better. So there'll be improvements from there. And for sure, the bikes now, with what they've learned and they're testing electronically, are faster or can go faster than what they did in 23. But yeah, it's the same bike. It's just they've learned a bit more, and track conditions are much better.
When you look at the GP24, it would be a wrong conclusion to say that it's 0.8 seconds faster because of conditions and all of the stuff. When you read something that Pecco was 8/10 under the lap record. So what do you think, how much did the GP23 is behind the GP24 at the moment?
Hard to know. Didia's doing a pretty good job. He's fairly close in terms of lap times to throughout the whole test, through to what the 24 guys are doing. Obviously, Mark was the highest GP23 in Qatar, and what was he? He was about 4/10 off, I think. So there you go. There's a relatively clear visualization, but also we know that Mark isn't at the pinnacle of what he can do with that bike just yet. I think it's kind of impossible to say how much faster the bike is, because it all depends on the rider, depends on the day, depends on the setup, all this sort of stuff. If it's 0.2 faster, if you had the same rider do an absolute 100% perfect lap on each bike, and if it's 0.2 quicker, the 24, I'd be surprised, So I think the actual improvement in terms of maybe outright speed is minimal, but what you'll have is just a bike that's easier to ride and easier to do the lap time, and that's where it makes a difference with long runs and all that sort of stuff.
And it looks like the GP24 isn't breaking down all the time. So is Ducati just giving Mark the old parts they don't need anymore, give him crash parts, and that's why the bike's breaking down all the time? Are they trying to sabotage his off-season so Pecco remains world champion?
Well, technically, by definition, yeah, they have given him the old parts they don't need anymore. They've given him last year's bike that no longer is required.
But on a serious, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem.
Are they using the same engines? The engines that ran all season, or built they new engines?
I presume there've been new engines that they built.
Okay.
Yeah. They'll be fresh. What do they have? Is it, how many engines do they have a year? 6? I think it's 6 engines, right? Or 8, something like that. 8 engines or something. They'll be brand new, fresh out of the factory engines. Yeah. So Don't worry, they haven't already done 5,000 Ks now. So
yeah, I was wondering this during the test somehow. And yeah, but what's the reason behind Mark's troublesome off-season?
In terms of the technical issues?
Yeah.
The reason we don't know, we asked him what the technical issues were, and he just said, it's normal, small little technical glitch. It was fine. The team just reset the bike, and then it was okay. And that's the truth. It was a very, very minor issue that they literally just had to do. We presume, Crafar was saying to me, he reckons that it's probably just a warning light that popped up on the dash, and he just limp moded it home, back around to the garage, and they checked everything that was okay, and they went, okay, it's fine, and just reset and go again. I don't think there's really anything to read into it. We see bikes have technical issues all the time, but it is interesting that, we haven't seen the 24 guys have any technical issues, and then Mark has, I think he had 3 of them during testing. So, but yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything to be worried about there.
We will see during the race weekends.
One thing that is interesting, actually, about Mark's machinery and equipment he has, is the fact that Ducati have given all the 23 riders, it's not just Mark, this is both riders in Gresini and both riders in VR46, they all have the start of season 23 spec. I was very surprised at that, because I thought they would just get Pecco's bike from Valencia, The only thing that's different is the upgrade they did midway through the year. They upgraded the tail unit, they added the fork wings, and the downwash ducts got bigger. But I was very surprised to see that none of them had it. I thought that they would have it in Sepang, and then they didn't. So then I thought, oh, maybe they'll just give it to them in Qatar for the last day. Maybe they're like, they still need to actually manufacture enough parts to do for 4 bikes. But no, they don't have it. They still are with the start of season 23 spec. What you can read into that, you can read into it what you want, whether it's Ducati being clever and just making sure their factory riders have a bit more, of a material advantage over the satellite ones, and fair enough, they're within their right to do that. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. The fact that Marc Marquez was getting on it, and then they're getting the start of season 23 spec rather than the end of season.
I remember us talking about the Marcus situation before it was announced. Obviously, it was announced very late in the season. And my whole argument was always Ducati doesn't need Marcus. He provides no positive benefit to them. They're winning
financially.
probably like sponsorship and attention, but then again, he's more associated with Gresini now than Ducati because it's a customer team, and they have 3 riders now on the GP24 who are the 3 top favorites for the World Championship. And my argument was that they're making themselves more problems than good with allowing Gresini to sign Marc, because there obviously are now, I would say, 5 alpha dogs in Ducati with Enea, Pecco, Jorge Martin, Marco Bezzecchi, and Marc Marquez.
Mm-hmm.
And you could make an argument for Digia being in the mix and maybe Alex Marquez. With Frankie, it's difficult to judge at the moment.
Yeah.
But could this be an issue that technically everything is fine? Ducati has the perfect bike, perfect riders. They should win out. That this hierarchy thing within Ducati kind of sabotages their performance on race weekends as the season progresses, as the championship progresses, and those little games start and intensify over the season. Do you think there's some conflict potential there that could seriously hurt Ducati?
Difficult to say. I don't think they could seriously hurt them. No, because if you are the Ducati board, looking at your MotoGP presence, and you see that you have 5 alpha dogs on Ducatis and 5. Well, I mean, realistically, once Frankie's up to speed, essentially you have 8 Ducatis, all with riders that could win a race. Like one benefit this year having Marc is that instead of Marc occasionally nicking a podium off a Ducati rider, now it's Marc on a Ducati nicking a podium off another Ducati rider. So there's that benefit there, that there's just kind of this Ducati whitewash. What you will have is obviously they set themselves up for a bit of a headache at the end of the year or midway through the year when they have to decide where those riders are going to be in their Ducati lineup for 2025. I don't think it's necessarily damaging to them to have Marc in there. Not at all. Obviously, the benefits are performance-wise. Marc is without a doubt going to go and get a bunch of podiums this year, win a bunch of races, most likely fight for a title. I mean, he's literally the odds-on favourite level with Pecco. I was checking today just out of curiosity to see what the betting odds are, and he was level with Pecco, which was interesting. So there's definitely performance benefits there. There's another win that Ducati could potentially pick up. And then financially, Marc's supporters will all of a sudden transfer from being Honda fans to Ducati fans and all this sort of stuff. So there's definitely that. But yeah, I mean, it's whether Ducati seriously look at the prospect of putting Marc into the factory team in 25. Because for one, you already have Jorge Martin, who's pissed off that he didn't get the factory seat when Enea Bastianini was given it. And you also have the other thing of they set themselves up for, I think, what most people would look at the slightly embarrassing scenario where a satellite bike beats the factory bike to the title. Is that embarrassing for Ducati? I think most fans would say yeah. But for them, like if you're looking at it from a brand perspective, it's great. In a sense, it's also not great in another sense. So there's some problems to having Marc Marquez in the team for sure. But I mean, it might not even be Mark that challenges Pecco for the title. Like, could be Jorge Martin again, or could be Bezecchi again, or it could be even Didier, because some people think Didier. I mean, I think Didier this year is going to be a real pain in the ass for the factory guys. He's looking really good, So yeah, we'll see. The interesting thing is what Mark does in 25, and that will determine how much of a headache Ducati have.
Yeah. I was going to ask you if you think it would be more damaging to Ducati if Mark on a Honda gets a podium here and there, or if Mark on a satellite Ducati, which is 1 year older, which is important, I think, wins the championship and not Pecco.
More damaging to Ducati. You'd probably say that Mark winning the title on a old bike is more damaging, but then it's really tricky because then it's also like, well, Ducati can spin it on its head as a positive and be like, yeah, look at how great our bikes are. Even the one that's a year old can still win a championship. Yeah, it would be. I don't think it'd be damaging to Ducati. I think it'd be damaging to Pecco.
That's true.
Pecco, and by the way, Pecco I think is brilliant. Loads of people underrate him, and I think he's truly one of the best riders that we've seen in quite some time.
And he started to be funny.
Yeah.
He used to be fucking boring and hard to listen to when he was saying the bike was too stable and stuff. But did you ask him how did he do it after his... Yeah, and he said, yeah, I cut corner 3.
Yeah, he's actually like quite a funny guy. Like he's got a dry sense of humor, and he's a really, really nice guy as well. Like for me, who's quite fresh to go into the races and all this sort of stuff, he's really personable and nice to you when you go for interview and all this. So you kind of want him to do well because of that. But I think the other side with Pecco is when he won the first championship, he kind of had half a season that was brilliant, and the first half was like, this guy maybe isn't up to the task. And so you were like, okay, he's won the title, but a lot of questions remain. Then last year, when he won the title again, you could look at it and say there are a lot of questions, or you could look at it and say he almost got his legs broken by KTM. And still, if you go and look at like the Wikipedia sheet with just the scores laid out, the finishes laid out in front of you, his season looks so impressive still because he's on the podium every fucking time, and he almost had no legs. So you could say that there's a huge thing there with overcoming difficult situations, remaining calm, and just dragging out the results when he needs. And he did that while he wasn't feeling great with the bike as well. But then the other big question that still remained was everyone last year was like, right, Jorge Martin is without a doubt the fastest guy in MotoGP on one lap. I mean, we'll see this year with how Mark goes on the Ducati when he gets a qualifying lap in, when he's got a toe in front of him. Because he always
Do you think he will still go for the toe with the Ducati?
I think early on he will look for it because he'll be learning still how to do it, Okay. He'll be learning still how to do that lap time. But then I think eventually we'll see him go back to how he was on the Honda, where he just doesn't give a fuck. And he just rolls out and goes for a lap. But yeah, there was a lot of questions with, right, next year if Jorge Martin can find the consistency, he's going to blow Pecco out of the water because he's just outright faster. But Pecco now seems to have improved in just his outright speed. Like the laps he's done in testing, okay, as we were saying, the lap time is kind of irrelevant. You shouldn't look at the lap time, but it's how he did the lap time. He did it so comfortably. Like both times he just rolled out one lap, done. No mistakes. And that's something that he maybe didn't do at the start of 23 through 22, all that sort of stuff. So he's still learning and getting better, which I think is why I think in the next few years he'll really prove himself to be one of the best we've seen in a while.
I think if Pecco wasn't so incredibly stupid with his 5 crashes every damn season, I mean, crashes like India, like Argentina, and like America, were crashes where he simply got too comfortable from my position out, as far as I can judge it, where he had no pressure from behind, he had everything under control, and then crashed. Obviously, stuff like Catalonia and Le Mans happens, I would say. But those other 3 crashes were more or less inexcusable. And if he didn't do this for the last 2 seasons, then I think the perception of him would be different, because he would have won the championship by 3 or 4 races, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, if you count up all the crashes, how many points did he throw away? A huge amount. So,
and there's good positions every time,
Yeah. But then on the flip side of it, you can say about Jorge Martin with his slightly slower start to the year and then some mistakes later in the year. How many points did he throw away? So it's all a 6 of one and half a dozen the other type job. But for sure, that's the single biggest question mark, as you rightly say. Like, Pecco has to iron out these mistakes that cost him generally 25 points at a time. So yeah, if he can do that, he'll be really hard to beat.
And also the thing is, you can beat Jorge Martin, and I think Pecco is, when he isn't stupid, he's extremely smart in a race situation.
Mm-hmm.
When he's under pressure, he always makes good decisions. He is very, very good in battle. He manages the race very well. So I think Pecco really is smarter than everybody, maybe except somebody like Mark.
Yeah.
When it comes to racecraft, also Enea is very smart. But the last time we saw Mark on a competitive bike was in 2019. And then he was flawless except for one race.
Mm-hmm.
And every race, I believe he was first or second. Maybe third, but I
first,
guess this
second,
would...
every race.
Yeah, first and second, right? And if we put him on a Ducati and Pecco is crashing so much again, then we might look at a scenario where Mark is gone, because Mark, the last time I checked, didn't do those mistakes. We don't know how older Marc Marquez, with his body and all of the stuff, manages over a full season. We don't know.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we'll see, as you say, how Mark does. I think that's a good point to point out about, his body is so much different now and he rides in a different way. And obviously he's learning to ride in a different way again on the Ducati. But absolutely, if Mark can still do that and be on the podium every single weekend and just be there all the time, if Pecco is the same Pecco as he was in 23, in 22, and 21, Mark will blow him out of the water if Mark is fast enough to be on the podium every time.
That's the thing. You don't have to be fast enough. You just have to be consistent, and then it will equal each other out,
Well, it's like Jorge Martin, like some of the inconsistency we saw with him, particularly his mistakes, is because I think he doesn't handle his emotions as well as Pecco does. And it was quite good to see from Jorge that even on the Sunday night, straight away in his interviews after losing the title in Valencia, he was immediately like, I have to work on being more mature. And I took that as he needs to learn how to handle his emotions better in high stress scenarios, because you would always, throughout that charge where he was closing up to Pecco and it was going down to the wire, he would come out and nail one race, but then the next race he'd mess up and he'd do it again. Nail one race, mess up. Nail one race, mess up. Like, his sprint in Valencia was a masterclass. It was fucking brilliant. But then you go to the race and he overcommits too early. The incident in Valencia where he went wide at turn 1 when he clipped the back of Pecco, he doesn't need to be that close. The reason why I think he was that close is because at the corner before, at the last turn, Pecco went slightly wide. And so did Martin, actually got sucked in because he obviously just braked at the same point as Pecco. But he didn't go as wide, so he kind of probably saw oh shit, here's my opening, I can get in front of him. And that's fair enough, but it was lap 3. And he's going in, and he knows, because he's riding MotoGP bikes for the last however many years, he knows that if he's right behind a bike on the brakes, he's going to get sucked in because he doesn't have all the downforce on the wings. And he's still committed to that and put himself in that scenario for it to go wrong, and it did go wrong. And I think if it was on the other foot and Pecco was behind, I just think his maturity and staying calm in those situations, he might not have done that same mistake. Not saying that like he absolutely wouldn't have. He might have still done the same mistake for sure, but I think it was higher probability that if it was Pecco, that wouldn't have happened and he would have gone through that corner fine.
Do you know who my dark horse for Qatar is?
Well, if it's not Pedro,
No, actually not. I have my opinion on his rookie season,
mm-hmm.
but we will talk about him later. It's actually Aprilia,
Oh yeah,
because obviously the clear favorite is Ducati, but my dark horse is Aprilia because we don't know how the track conditions develop in Qatar from now on to the race. There's
yeah,
apparently a lot of car racing going on there,
yeah.
and it's the desert with all the sand. And if it happened to be a situation where the track was extremely low in grip, maybe a lot of sand, you don't know how the wind develops over the next month. There could be even rain in Qatar, Who knows? Do you remember this Monday night race in Qatar? Because on
Yeah,
Sunday,
yeah, like
stuff like this,
2009 or whatever year it
yeah,
was.
stuff like this could happen. And Aprilia is very, very good in those low grip races like Catalonia. So I think Aprilia is very, very. They have like a niche specialty. That's the word. A niche specialty where they aren't as consistent as other manufacturers, but when the conditions are perfect, Aprilia is unbeatable.
Yeah.
And they have this new arrow which is apparently very, very good for Aleix and not too good for Maverick. But I think if all stars align, Aprilia could do very well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at Aleix's pace throughout testing, really impressive and very, very close to the top Ducatis, We're like just absolutely a dark horse, like as you say. The thing that worries me with Aprilia is that we often see them do really well in preseason testing and then they kind of disappear in the races when we come down to crunch time. Whether that's going to happen again, I don't know. The thing that you say about them with being very good on low grip tracks, that's going to be interesting to watch if that's still the case, because the bike has changed quite a lot with the aero this year. And they said that the balance of the bike has changed significantly, and that's meant they have to set it up different ways and all this sort of stuff. So if it means that still the bike is incredibly good in low grip conditions and they've done very well to retain the character of the bike while changing the way it rides a lot, but I don't necessarily think that it's 100% going to be the same story. And if it's not, then that's good because they need to change it anyway. Like they can't just have a bike that works extremely well in low grip and then isn't as good when the grip is medium or high. So we'll see what happens with Aprilia. I mean, the interesting thing is, as you say, Aleix is like, yeah, bike's great, clear step forward from 2023, suits me really well. And then you've got Maverick on the other hand that's like, oh, I'm struggling, lack of feeling. And then Miguel Oliveira too, confirming what Maverick's saying with lack of feeling and didn't have the rear grip. But then in Qatar, we saw Maverick slowly figure it out. Maverick, by the end of Qatar Test, was looking a lot better and looking a bit more like his normal self. And actually, his runs were pretty close to what Aleix was doing. So, good. And his lap time was close to Aleix, his qualifying sim. So, not bad. Then Miguel Oliveira also, once he did the same thing as Maverick and switched back to the 2023 tail unit and got rid of that big underseat diffuser, halfway through day 2, he figured it out as well. They found the problem and they were like, okay, we're actually, calm now because we found the problem. We know what it was and we've kind of rectified it, but we just didn't have enough testing time to really then go and build on it and find the pace that we need. So it pretty look all right. They do look okay, but there's a big kind of, question mark above their head about whether they'll actually translate it from testing to racing.
But weren't the Aprilia guys very good at the first day in Qatar or the first hours in Qatar when the grip was pretty low?
I mean, it's so hard to judge that because they were like the first few laps that were going in Qatar were like 6-7 seconds off the lap record.
Okay.
I think the only thing you can say is that throughout it, fairly consistency, Leish was like towards the top of the timesheets. So yeah, probably in the lower grip conditions they still look all right, but we don't know until we go to a track that naturally has low grip. Like the surface in Qatar is actually very, very grippy. It's just the sand that gets on it that makes it low grip. So when we go to a race like Barcelona again, then we'll know.
Okay. What's up with Aprilia that they didn't manage to bring the new engine for 2 years in a row now to the tests? I remember us talking after Portimao, where they didn't bring the new engine, and you said, okay, they will just plug it in and it won't be much of a different engine than the 22 engine. Now, same story. They didn't bring the engine to all 3 tests we had so far. And apparently, it's not a big step forward from the old engine, just small things apparently. So, A, what's up with Aprilia that they don't bring the new engines to the tests? Why can't they build them in time? And B, are small steps enough to close the gap to Ducati?
I'll answer the small steps thing first. Are small steps enough to close the gap? I mean, it depends on the size of the steps that Ducati take. As long as your steps are slightly bigger than them, then it'll be fine. I do think small steps, yeah, they are you can close the gap to Ducati by just doing small steps. It depends where those small steps are in which areas. If you take a small step in, I don't know, your rear grip, will make a big difference. But if you take a small step in maybe your fuel management or something like that, the efficiency of the engine won't make a massive difference. So it depends where those are. The thing that's a little bit confusing about this new engine is that the official line we have is no, the new engine isn't there. It'll be there in the first race. But then in one of the interviews I did with Maverick in Qatar, he literally said, "Oh, we're struggling with the new engine, the torque delivery." So I'm quite confused. I don't know if the interview is on the website or not on MotoGP.com. Maybe it is. So yeah, I don't know like if the new engine's there or not now. Like I'm quite confused. You would presume that like surely they would want to test with the new engine, but then if they haven't, then obviously it's the same as last year where they know that the new engine is very similar. It's just maybe a little bit more power and in some area, and that it's fine that when they plug it into the bike for the first race, they won't feel like a change in character. So that's fair enough. If it's like that it's not a different character of the engine, then like yeah, okay, it's still a little bit of a strange thing to not test it before going, but they will have obviously done all the dyno runs and they'll know exactly how that engine works and the character it has. So they're pretty much prepared to just plug it in. They know it's going to be okay. But yeah, weird. I don't know. So I really don't know if they tried the new engine or not after what Maverick said.
I have 2 quick questions for you. Did they solve the heat issues? I mean, no, didn't?
No.
Or we don't know?
No. So they did. I guess you would have seen in Sepang, they did a run in the middle of the day, I think day 2 or day 1, whichever day it was, where all 3 24s went out together. So Miguel, Maverick, and Elation, they were all following each other. They said that no, the heat issue wasn't solved. They made slight improvements, but no, it's still the heat issue is too much.
And what's up with the carbon chassis from Aprilia?
Not sure. We didn't see it, or at least I didn't see it. The thing is, obviously, Ralph Hernandez crashed on day 1 in Sepang and broke his pelvis and his hip, and then you got those 3 fractures. So whether Savadori was going to test with a test team during the days in Sepang or not, I don't know. I don't think he was planning to, but maybe he would have done some runs. But then obviously Savadori went on and tested on Raul's 23 bike for the whole of the Sepang test. So perhaps they had a plan to test with the carbon chassis with Savadori on the test team bike, but maybe that got thrown out of the window after Raul's crash. But at least on the factory bikes, we didn't see the carbon chassis at all. The last time we've seen it was in Valencia when Savadori was testing there.
I would like to talk to you about my favorite topic ever, Pedro Acosta, and I would like to tell you about some quotes I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
And after Sepang, Brad Binder said this is the best off-season we ever had.
Yeah.
And this is why I love Pedro so much. He was faster than Brad Binder and said to the media, well, you can't be perfect everywhere. I made some mistakes here and there, you know. So it was very, very funny to hear him because he's like a very cool dude when you talk to him.
Yeah.
And
he's good.
he is getting the maturity, you know, and he walks this fine line between being entertaining but not cocky, you know?
Yes.
Like the pizza thing in Mugello. It was perfectly on the line, you know? Nobody gets mad at him for being for taunting basically the team he beat. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, it's very funny and it's very likable, you
Yeah.
know?
In England, we would describe him as being a bit cheeky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he has a certain swagger.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah. And he is doing extraordinarily well at the moment. Like, compare him to his teammate. And for everybody who doesn't know, you would say Augusto is the rookie.
Mm-hmm.
And is the MotoGP world now also on the Pedro hype train? And if yes, welcome.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think anyone that actually knows, about MotoGP and the lap times he's doing and how impressive they are, like, for sure, everyone's on the Pedro hype train. The thing is, it's, we talk about him as though he's the second Marc Marquez. And if he is, then there's a lot of expectation on what he's going to do this year. So he's obviously getting onto a KTM, which is not the best bike on the grid. When Mark got onto the Honda in 2013, you'd say it was the best bike on the grid. So there's that. Is he going to go out and do the headline things like Mark and win straight away? No, probably not. But I do think, like, almost immediately he's going to be giving, immediately he will be giving Jack a headache for sure. And I think pretty quickly after he'll be giving Brad a headache, it really wouldn't surprise me if we roll out in Qatar and like Pedro finishes just behind Brad. Well, no, maybe that's wrong. I think Brad actually will be fucking good in Qatar. Like, I think he'll be right there. If he can see Brad coming across the line, like he's within 5 or 6 seconds of him, like, I think that's a phenomenal performance. Do I think he'll get much better than that? Like, maybe not. I don't think he'll be right there with Brad, but I think he can be close to him. And then it's really, like, if he's 5 or 6 seconds behind Brad, like, what's Jack going to do in Qatar? Is he going to be that close to Brad? This is quite a big question. So, yeah, definitely, like, straight away, he's going to be good. What we would maybe expect from Pedro, like, in terms of a championship position in his first year, is that's pretty impossible to answer. But if he is the second Marc Marquez, even on a KTM when it's clearly not as good as the Ducati, like, he has to be top 6 in the championship, top 5 in the championship, really, if he is this good, if he is as good as Marc Marquez. Like, Brad Binder put that KTM to 4th in the championship last year, and realistically, you wouldn't be surprised if Brad goes top 3 in the championship this year. So
I would be surprised, honestly, with Enea, Jorge, and Pecco, and Mark,
and
Bezecchi.
Yeah, this is true. That's true.
But
so, like, then it's, what can Pedro do? Is he going to be like Brad and be contesting for top 4 in the championship? I don't think so, as you say, because there are other guys there on Ducatis that are going to be so good. But top 6, I think, isn't, an unrealistic goal.
I hate these Marc Marquez comparisons because it's 2 totally different times. Back then, there were 4 competitive bikes.
Yeah.
If you had a very, very bad weekend and didn't crash, you would finish 4th on either a Yamaha or a factory Honda. Then Marc had a little bit of luck that both Danny Pedrosa and Jorge Lorenzo got injured.
Mm-hmm.
Because then all of a sudden, only Valentino Rossi is your real opposition there, and he wasn't quite on up to the task in 2013 when he came back from Ducati. So the competitiveness of the field is so much higher, and MotoGP has become so much more difficult. You just have more things to do as a rider. You have ride height devices, you have a lot going on with the wings and how you position yourself during the race so you don't get sucked in or whatsoever, and don't overheat your front tire. Those were all non-existent in 2013, and therefore I believe it's wrong to expect a certain result from Pedro. I think the better approach, which I have with every rookie, I remember talking about it when Raul and Remy went into MotoGP, and also last year with Augusto. The objective should be to finish as many races as possible, to collect as much data as possible, and to not hurt yourself. Like a Jorge Martin situation where he crashes in Portimao and is out for half the season is worst case scenario for a rookie. And I really, I mean, I understand it. It's like the same discussion with who's the GOAT, Michael Jordan or LeBron James. Those discussions is just popular with people. But I think it's really unnecessary to compare Marc's rookie season to Pedro's. You could compare Augustus to Pedro and then have Augusto has a 4th place in Le Mans. And maybe if Pedro manages to get on the podium, you would say, okay, look, he's doing better. Or compare him with the other KTMs, But you laid out that the KTM isn't the most competitive bike out of the top 3 European bikes. You could argue Aprilia is better. And you could also make an argument that Tech 3 is a mess. I mean, I've heard stuff from different people from Moto E to MotoGP, Moto 3, that Tech 3 isn't the best team when it comes to structure and organization. And this is all stuff that kind of makes it impossible to compare. So, I think Pedro will surprise a lot of people and he will have good moments, but he will also have moments where he's overwhelmed and maybe makes mistakes, and all of a sudden he's out of the points. Could very well be. And it's just a process of being a rookie. Like, same with Nicolo Borrega. You can't expect him to go in there and win every race, It's a process, and to learn everything, how to do it correctly. He has not much time to adapt on a race weekend because you have free practice, yes, but then you have qualifying, you have the sprint race, you have the main race, and it suits Pedro that he's such a quick learner. But I really hope that the way I know him and the way I assume Aki Ayu taught him to be is to not let the pressure get to him. And he's very, very calm in situations, and is fun. So I think that he's smart enough to not try to force those expectations, And I really hope that he's doing good, stays healthy, and then we can maybe talk about a factory team next season, and then we can talk about results.
Yeah, I know for sure. I agree largely. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're going into a rookie season, the only thing you demand from them is that they give 110%, and that they every time they get on the bike try to get the best out of themselves, and that's it. I think we asked Pedro, and it was like, what are your own expectations? He's like, I don't have any. And the team, for sure, don't put any expectations on him because it's silly to. Until you do the first race, you don't really know his level. You can have a look at testing and kind of guess where he's going to be. Like, I think if we go to Qatar, like a top 10 is definitely realistic for him. And then it's like, right, maybe he pulls off some magic and he's actually a lot more competitive than what we've seen so far. And, he scores a really, really strong result and starts floating around the top 6. But, you don't know until he goes and does that first race. And as you say, then it's like he does the first race, he does the second race, does the third race, does the fourth race. and then you kind of like can have a look at where he is in his progression, and then from there, then you start to improve. But the only thing you can ask from him is just every time he gets on the bike, he gives it 110% and really tries to learn. That's it.
And he's on a KTM, and I'm not necessarily the biggest KTM fan because over the last couple of years, they've always been up and down, very inconsistent. And I thought that the steel frame was just stupid to use. And they kind of got rid of it now. I think Augusto is still riding the steel frame.
No, he's now on the carbon one.
Now on a carbon? Okay. So they got rid of it. Everybody's using it now. And KTM seems like, from the outside, please elaborate if I'm wrong, that they are more a manufacturer who copies what other manufacturers are doing. Like they entered MotoGP, got Mike Leitner, and it's looked a lot like a Honda. And then they developed, of course, over the past seasons. And now you could see them implementing those big wings at the front from Ducati, those downwash ducts. Then Aprilia came along with the ground effect thing. They copied that as well, which is fair game. And then the rear wing, I believe Ducati and Aprilia started with the carbon thing. I first heard it from Aprilia, but I don't know where that came from in KTM. But in general, it appears to be that KTM isn't really innovating a lot of stuff. They're just putting pieces together that they see work. And this kind of makes me wonder if you could really overtake somebody like Ducati or overtake Aprilia and be competitive consistently if you don't innovate something that the others don't have, so you could leapfrog them, you know? What's your
Yeah,
take on this? You watched KTM develop a lot more closely than I have over the past seasons, and also the other manufacturers. So what do you make out of this
I think I
conspiracy
disagree.
theory?
Yeah, I think I disagree, but not like disagree in a flat out sense of like you're wrong. Um, I do think they innovate, but so if you go back to the start of KTM in MotoGP, yeah, everyone knows that essentially what they did was they looked at the bike that was winning at the time and they went, okay, let's take um, the major design points and kind of put them into our own package.
They
But
even had a screamer engine, right?
they had a screamer, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, initially, but they got rid of that pretty quick. Um, yeah, so they had a screamer engine. It looked a lot like the Honda in terms of the geometry. Apparently, it was relatively similar to the Honda. We know that they always like kind of had this real kind of on the limit front end feeling for a long, long time, and well, welcome to Honda territory. Um, but they started out by doing something different to what anyone had done before with the steel frame, and they've always done that. They have a steel frame in motocross. They have a steel frame with everything they do. You know, there's always that design point that is different, and I think that is an ethos of KTM doing it their own way, but also looking at it and going, if you just do what everyone else does, then you'll only ever get to the same level as them. You'll never go beyond. So I think that's an innovative thing there anyway, to be like, okay, we see that everyone does the aluminium chassis and whatever. Let's do it steel and let's see if we can make it work. And in motocross, they have made it work and they raised the bar in motocross. And for sure, the KTM at the minute is like, you could say it's the best bike in the motocross field. A lot of people say the stock Yamaha is better than the KTM, but the bike that's winning all the championships or has won most of the championships recently is the KTM. Obviously, the Yamaha has won a few recently, but mainly the KTM has been dominating both in America and then also in the MXGP scene. So there's that. So then they come into MotoGP and quite boldly, after a long, long time, they ditched the steel chassis to go with carbon. Whether they were the first to start working on it over Aprilia, we don't know. Like they've probably been working on it for a couple of years now with R&D, and then actually having the first units and putting it together. They
But they're the
definitely,
first ones who are using it, and it could be a very
yeah,
big advantage if you develop it over time.
for sure. Yeah, I mean they're the first to go and use it in race situation and be on the podium with a full carbon chassis. the way that they do their carbon chassis is definitely innovative in a MotoGP sense, because what they have is like carbon tubes, and then they're bonded into what we presume is a mix of aluminium and titanium for the parts where you have a lot of stress, where you have the swing arm pivot going through, and where the engine mounts bolt onto and stuff like that. So that's quite an innovative method to do it. We actually see the first time I saw it was in mountain biking, in downhill mountain biking, a company called Atherton Bikes. They did that. They had carbon tubes and then aluminium or titanium lugs, they call them, where those carbon tubes bond into. So definitely a fairly innovative process there. In other things with the aero, obviously they didn't really properly get stuck into the aero until they had the partnership with Red Bull Advanced Technologies. But they were the first to pair the downwash ducts with the ground effect side fairings. Obviously, their version perhaps maybe didn't work that great initially, but actually they still use it now. It's very slightly updated, but they still use it now. Like Brad switched back to it halfway through the year after the update and all this sort of stuff. So there's an innovative thing there, with taking ideas from other manufacturers and putting them together and putting it into their way. They definitely copy, for sure. Like everything in motorsport is copied from someone or some other team, But I think the innovative thing is they look at ideas and good ideas that work from elsewhere and they bring them in, they put their own spin on it. And that is where I would say they're innovative. But definitely, like, if you're not copying or taking ideas from your competitors, then you're doing it wrong.
No, of course. I mean, Honda and Yamaha are basically doing the same.
Yeah.
Yamaha is kind of innovative with their inline four, but look at the Honda. It's just what works for the other manufacturers and put it on our bike. And they've done it pretty radically. I like the rear wing that they combine the Stegosaurus with the rear wing, really. And I guess the next evolution would be to do something like Ducati does with the downwash ducts and the ground effect thing. My thing with KTM is just that every manufacturer, at some way, I've seen them innovate something really crazy, like Honda with the seamless gearbox. Back then, it was huge. Then you had Ducati with the Aero. Like, they were the first ones to put wings on a bike. It was unheard of, and it took them 5 years to really make it work, and then everybody did it. Then it was kind of banned from 2017 onwards, but they have found a way to maneuver through this rulebook, and now we have Ducati how it is now. Ducati is very, very innovative with the electronics. They made this electronic setting work for them much better than everybody else. You have Aprilia bringing new stuff in the aero department. It looks like Aprilia is very, very good at developing and innovating within aerodynamics, like the ground effect thing. And maybe this diffuser thing is something we will see more over the next couple of seasons, because they sparked an idea. Maybe it didn't really work out, but it will get better. And, so with the carbon chassis, it's correct. It's true that they have, they're the only ones with the carbon chassis. But my opinion on that one is that the steel frame was so shitty that they needed to move on from it, because it clearly didn't work consistently. Yes, you had races here and there where they were unbeatable and they were very great. But look at Brett Binder. He won in 2020 in Brno. Miguel won in 2020 in Portimao and in Austria. And Miguel won in 21 in Catalonia.
Yes.
And Brad had this crazy race in Austria, but since then, no race wins. So you get to a point where I believe the lower level compared to the aluminium chassis of the steel frame enhanced KTM's decision to move to the carbon, because Aprilia is working on it as well, and it seems to be more difficult to achieve a higher level of performance with the carbon chassis. But still, they did it, and it's a very, very innovative thing to do, and also could be a huge potential if you develop this 10 years and have like a, let's say, 3-year head start on Aprilia, maybe whenever they will bring it. this could be something, but it looks like KTM is just like picking, okay, this works for others, let's put it on our bike and after. So I don't know if this is necessarily enough to satisfy their approach of we want to win here if they don't bring something very, very innovative, which
Yeah.
takes other manufacturers years to develop. Like the aero thing is a very, very easy example of this. Ducati was very keen on the electronics, and not sorry, on the aerodynamics, and Honda and Yamaha basically did nothing over the pandemic. And now you have those monsters, and you have a Yamaha that looks like a bike from 2021. You know, and
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. I'm very excited to see how Pedro does on a KTM. If they can manage to be on one level with the Ducatis or even above, but because then I think Pedro's riding talent will eventually be greater than Pecco's, Ineos. I really think that. But KTM has to get there first. They have to be consistent, they have to be fast over one lap, and they have to be very, very smart with their approach on how to manage the season. And I haven't seen that yet from KTM. That's why maybe it's a bit harsh to say they don't innovate, but maybe the level of innovation is not as high as in Ducati or in Aprilia.
Yeah. No, it's a fair comment. I think as well we have to remember that they're the newest factory, and by the time that they came in 17, I think it was.
No, earlier.
Was it?
They were earlier, I believe.
I think it was 17. No.
I think it was the last race of 15 where Mika Kallio raced, and then
Really?
from 2016 onwards.
Well, maybe, but I always thought
Okay.
it was 17.
But you could argue that Aprilia is even newer because they ran this stupid CRT thing for the first 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, they basically ran a
Yeah.
done-up V4 superbike, which actually, like, in its first couple of years, it developed really well, and then they made it into a bit of a mess. But the point with KTM is, like, they're still the newest manufacturer. And by the time they came in, all these sorts of things were done. Like the Big Bang engine was already done. Aero was starting to come in already, like getting fairly extensive. Like by 17, fucking hell, yeah, the Ducati had that big aero fairing that like went halfway down the fairing as well.
You mean the Jorge Lorenzo one?
Yes, yeah. What else did you have in 17? Carbon swing arms were already around. All sorts of stuff. So they're always playing catch up, and the first thing that they have innovated is this carbon chassis. And I do think that you'll go and see other like we already are. Aprilia are working on it. Whether they actually bring it to the track or not, if they find that the chassis is good and it works better, then okay. But I think you'll see other factories look at it as well. I think you could see Honda look at a carbon chassis and Ducati. We know that Honda have obviously tried before with bonding carbon onto the outside of an aluminium chassis, so they've kind of looked at using carbon to, tune some of the weaknesses of the aluminium chassis and all this sort of stuff. The big thing with the carbon chassis is that it's so light. Like it's apparently KTM's chassis is incredibly light. Like it's barely believable how light it is, and there was some rumors or whispers that apparently when they first brought it in, they were worried about the bike even being in the above the minimum weight limit because it was that light. And if you can make your bike lighter, it helps in a lot of ways. Maybe it could be a disadvantage by making it a little bit too light and it's maybe a little bit skittish, but you can dial that out with other things, larger aero and all that sort of stuff and electronics. So yeah, I think definitely the point is valid that KTM don't appear to be the most innovative, but I think largely it's because they've always been having to catch up, and Ducati, Honda, Yamaha have 20 plus years of development and innovation into their bikes, where KTM haven't got that. They've got 8 years.
Which brings us, you already mentioned Honda, to somebody who didn't even bother to copy for 5 years or whatsoever, and are even less innovative than than KTM. I mean, the last thing I really can remember where Honda shocked the MotoGP world was the seamless gearbox. And this was 2012 or whatsoever. And it took off 3/10 per lap time. Per lap, and then over the course of a race, it was crazy fast. But Honda has made a huge step compared to last season. The bike looks incredibly different. The bike is apparently a lot lighter. I've heard something like 8 kilos.
Yeah.
Where I think, like, what did you do before? Like, you have a weight limit of 155 or 157. What is it?
I think 157, yeah.
Yeah, but then you run around with a bike which is 165. Like, what are you doing? And they made massive upgrades with the aero. They made, apparently with the engine, a lot of upgrades, new chassis, new everything. And the big question is, of course, they won't be competitive for the first race. Of course, they will test a lot and bring a lot of new parts with all the concessions, bring engine updates. Have they figured out or made improvements in the big areas which concern Honda, which is rear grip and electronics? Do you know anything about what's going on there?
Electronics is harder to know because you never get an answer on exactly what they're working on, and also then whether they're making tangible step forwards, because electronics covers a wide range of topics, so you don't really get a specific answer. Definitely in terms of the rear grip, they made a step forward, but it's still the biggest problem. They just struggle with it spinning too much, and then because of that spinning, it's chewing the tire, and then that means they struggle in the longer runs and all this sort of stuff. So definitely a big step forward. The engine is the biggest single thing, maybe, but then on the chassis side as well, apparently the bike is a lot longer now, and they seem to have found something that gives them a lot more front feeling and better braking stability and stuff like this. But still, stability is the other big downside of the bike. They don't have a lot of rear stability on the exit of the corner.
Do you think this will come with a better engine? Like this famous quote, 80% of your rear grip comes from your engine.
I think.
And
Sorry, go on.
with the concessions, obviously, where they can develop the engine, do you think this is something they can fix during the season? Or do you think it's more of a geometry, weight distribution, or whatever thing?
I think it's all like every reason altogether. There's small areas in each thing, whether it's the engine, the geometry, electronics, where they can make improvements in all of them to eventually get to the level they need to be. The thing that's interesting is obviously the engine is new and it does sound a fraction different, but it's still the only V4 out there which sounds different to the other V4s. The other V4s, we all believe they're this twin pulse configuration, and the Honda still sounds way different. It sounds a little bit more aggressive,
Could you explain this?
So the twin pulse thing is basically in a V4 you have two pistons looking one way, the front bank of cylinders, and two pistons looking the other way. That's how you have a V configuration, In a traditional V4, each piston, well, in a traditional firing order, whether it's a V4 or an inline four, each piston fires in line with each other. So one goes, then the second one goes, and the third one goes, and the fourth one goes. What that means is you have the spark plug actually igniting in sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 4 type thing. I think it's actually like 1, 3, 2, 4 if you go for an inline four. What the twin pulse is, two of the pistons fire at the same time. So essentially you only have two ignitions, or at least two times where there is an ignition event for each cycle. So you have two pistons hitting the top of the cylinder at the same time, then coming back down, and then the next two are up at the same time. So it's kind of turning a V4 into like a V-twin, and V-twins are famously quite smooth. They have a really smooth power curve. So you can get the power of having a V4, but then make it smoother by kind of getting it to act like a V-twin. And that's a big thing that helped Ducati really make a step forward. And then also KTM last year changed to that twin pulse configuration. You can hear it when you hear the two different engines fire up. They're both still big bangs, but when they do the twin pulse configuration, it just has a deeper tone. It was quite interesting because Brad Binder last year was like, about the engine, he was just kind of, it's whatever, like it's not faster. But it was Jack Miller who'd had a lot of experience with that, what we believe was the twin pulse V4 from the Ducati, that went, no, it's better. You get to the lap time easier and smoother. Like it's better. It's not faster. It's just better. And the Honda, we believe, is still not like that. It fires in a more traditional way.
You mean more screamer?
Yeah, but it's not a screamer. It's still a big bang. It's just perhaps it fires in a more aggressive pattern. So, I don't know too much about it. I might be, someone that knows a lot more about engines will be able to clarify more than me, but that's my basic understanding of it. So what that will help is if you have an engine that naturally delivers its power smoother, you should technically have better rear grip. Obviously, it depends on a lot of things, how you manage it with electronics and all this sort of stuff. But Honda's still the factory in V4 that struggles the most with rear grip, and they're the only one that still doesn't have this engine that sounds like all the others. So, you wonder if they would explore that avenue at some point.
Do you think Honda is in better shape than Yamaha? Or do you think Yamaha is doing better than Honda?
Whether they're in better shape is tricky. What I think is that Honda's future is brighter. I look at Honda now like I looked at Aprilia in 2020. They've made a change for the good. They've found the direction to go in. Okay, if you look at Aprilia's season from 19 to 20, when Aprilia changed from their 75-degree V4 to the 90-degree V4, their results didn't necessarily improve. Actually, it looked a little bit worse in their first year with the V4, with the 90-degree bike, sorry. But it was for sure a much better bike and had a lot more potential. I think what you'll see in the next couple of seasons is Honda take bigger steps and get better, Whereas Yamaha, I think, in this rule set with the aero, I think it's naturally against them. I think that V4s work better in this rule set than inline 4. So I don't see Yamaha's ceiling as high, and I don't think we'll see them take as big steps forwards as what Honda can do in the next few years.
What are Yamaha's big steps they took?
The engine is smoother than last year and a little bit more power. So they have slightly better rear grip apparently, but it's still too aggressive for qualifying. And they really struggle with, on the new tyre, it just causes all sorts of problems when the new tyre spins and then it makes it aggressive at the corner, and they have some rear vibration and stuff like this. So they can't extract the performance from a new tyre. They can go as fast on a new tyre as they can on a tyre that's had 12 laps on it. So that's still the biggest problem, but the fact that they've made it better in terms of the top speed, excuse me, hopefully they'll then be able to use their really strong braking to actually overtake now, even though they're still struggling with the rear grip. So if you have a couple of extra Ks down the straight, okay, you're still struggling out the corner, but by the end of the straight, you'll be a fraction closer, and then hopefully you can outbrake them still.
Yamaha's aero looks like it finally arrived in 2021 when, those Aprilia wings they ran back then, look extremely similar to the Yamaha wings they're running now. They have basically nothing on the side of the fairing except those downwash ducts, I believe. And like the rear wing looks lazy in a way. You have this wild thing Honda is doing where they're combining the Stegosaurus to the real spoiler. Then KTM is doing a lot of stuff with the rear wing. Ducati is doing a lot of stuff with the rear. Aprilia brings some kind of Batmobile. And Yamaha, they just put something on there so it looks funny, I believe. So it looks like, okay, we're doing something, but I don't think they have an actual understanding of air flowing from the time it hits the bike until the bike releases the air in a way, and it looks like this is a very dumbed down version of aerodynamics they had back in 2000, 19, 20, 21, where they didn't have anything at the fairing. They are taking advantage of something like a ground effect, which could be cool for Yamaha because Yamaha always handled very well.
Mm-hmm.
And the ground effect improves corner speed, but is not as mobile or as agile from one side to the other side, And maybe, I don't know, I would try it if I was Yamaha at least. Maybe this I lost the word, fuck. This ground
Down.
effect thing
Yeah, yeah.
kind of complements the character of the Yamaha. Could very well be that it still handles better than most bikes, but is fast in the corner, And I don't see Yamaha trying a lot. Where I see Honda, they're doing everything. They're putting everything on the bike. The bike is lighter. They have new aero. They have everything, you know. And even though I would agree with you that Honda's future is brighter, even though Honda brings all of this, Yamaha looks lazy, And I really don't understand why. They say, or Fabio said that they have a very new, um, very new approach to testing and development, and some things apparently radically changed. But I don't know, because all Fabio wanted ever was more power, but I don't think this is really the issue for Yamaha. And they have, Andrea Dovizioso, Valentino Rossi, they all say, hey, we need rear grip, and Fabio's all about power. And they don't have a satellite team, which is a negative for data collection, and you can't compare stuff, which makes it a little bit tough for me to comprehend the statement that Yamaha did radically different things, but then don't really bring anything to the tests visibly from the aerodynamics perspective. From TV, you can't see if the bike is shorter or longer or
Mm-hmm.
heavier or lighter. You just basically see the aero. And the thing with the top speed, my understanding is that you mentioned how great Yamaha's on the braking, that they just brake later, so the top speed appears to be higher because the measurement point is in the braking zone of, let's say, a Ducati,
Yeah.
but not in the braking zone of a Yamaha, where it's difficult to say, okay, Yamaha's really fast now because it doesn't seem like this. And also, top speed doesn't necessarily provide you too much of the benefits when you look at a whole racetrack, because you make up your time in the corners, and that's where the aerodynamics kicks in. Formula One cars aren't necessarily fast on a straight, but they're damn fast in the corner.
Yeah.
And it looks like that Yamaha still didn't really get it from the outside, on that the tides have shifted now, and you need to bring in massive amounts of aero, and you need to bring in stuff and try it. And a satellite team would be great, yes, but it doesn't seem like from the outside that Yamaha really changed their approach. What's your understanding of all of
Yeah.
this?
My viewpoint on the Yamaha is that obviously in this aero age of MotoGP, I think all you've seen the aero do, and well, yeah, what it has done is it's limited the weaknesses of a V4 that doesn't have aero. It's allowed it to corner faster by forcing it to get into the ground, and then they can carry that corner speed and have a better feeling. And also with the development of the engine and all this sort of stuff, and the change to big bang engines and all this, we've seen over the last 10 years V4s just get better at being smoother in the corner and all this, because naturally a V4 is a more aggressive engine, has a shorter crankshaft, so it spins up quicker than an inline four. I think the thing that holds Yamaha back now is the fact that I believe that Fabio in his head is essentially like asking for all these things that he sees from a V4. He wants the aero, and he wants faster acceleration and all this sort of stuff. But he has a bike that works in an entirely different way. The engine is completely different, and naturally, you've always seen Yamaha's work by carrying a corner speed and more lean angle for longer and running these long sweeping lines. And still, the Yamaha, they do that because you hear them, saying in races that we can't run the lines we need to extract the lap time and all this sort of stuff. because they have to run longer sweeping lines, and then it leaves them vulnerable to being overtaken by the V4s that can just dive for the apex, park it, turn it, and fire off the corner and fire off faster. So I think naturally, when Yamaha are looking at developing aero and they go for like high downforce aero and all this sort of stuff, it just works against the way that the bike needs to be ridden and needs to be developed. You have Carl Crutchlow in the last year saying that the problem is not the power. We have to have better rear grip and carry that corner speed and use the smooth engine and a slightly slower engine, but one that allows us to extract the rear grip and then extract the actual power that the engine already has anyway. So I think Cal looks at it much like the bike doesn't need all the aero. We need to develop in a different way to what the V4s do. We have to go back at winning at our game, not winning at their game.
Don't you?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I think that's the thing. I think naturally, with adding more aero onto an inline four bike, I don't think is always going to get you to where you want to be and beating V4s.
Don't you think it would be worth trying?
Yeah, it definitely
And
is worth trying.
B, don't you think there is maybe a way to make aero work for the Yamaha, and which wouldn't work for a V4 and vice versa?
I think there has to be a way that it works, but Yamaha, at least from my understanding, are one of the few factories where, Ducati have ownership from Audi, and Audi are obviously big into cars. They have all the wind tunnels and all this sort of stuff. They have the aero people already, and Ducati have a whole aerodynamics department, which is full of people that specialize in aerodynamics, and that's all done in house now in Ducati. Yamaha, from what I understand, are one of the few that doesn't have, an extensive aerodynamics department in house. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that they do a lot of their aerodynamics work outsourced with partners. Obviously, KTM, essentially now it's all in house with Red Bull Advanced Technologies. Aprilia, the Piaggio group, has so much money and so many operations that they can. Aprilia itself isn't very rich. They have the smallest budget of any factory team, but they have a lot of budget to be allocated if they need it. And they've obviously said to Piaggio, look, we need to go into aerodynamics. And they've gone into that heavily, which is good. So you've seen development there. And then obviously Honda are the other ones where they have the capability to go and develop aerodynamics. And you're seeing that now. But for a long, long time, they didn't think it was necessary. So they didn't. So I think what holds Yamaha back as well is that if they were to develop aero that does work for an inline four and doesn't work for a V4 and it was something different entirely, I think they don't have the capability to do it themselves.
Do you think that from 2027 onwards, with the new rule set, Yamaha will be more competitive again?
Yeah. Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, this was my last question. So, no, my last question will be, who's your pick for MotoGP World Champion? You ask everybody on the grid who's your favorite, so now I have to ask you.
I think Pecco. Do you want me to say why or not?
I mean, it's obvious why. We talked like 30 minutes about Ducati, and I guess you don't have to repeat yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think more of it, though, is to do with Pecco and not Ducati. I think
Okay,
he's still
you
getting
think
better.
Pecco is just the better rider, more mature, more complete rider?
Yeah, maybe more complete, you could say. Yeah, definitely more mature than Jorge Martin.
Yeah.
Well, not mature, but can control his emotions better. That's not saying that I don't think Jorge Martin could beat Pecco. I think he could, but he just has to make those changes and become the rider that he needs to be to do it. But I think the other thing is Pecco, also, if he can make some changes and iron out the mistakes, he's already shown that he's learning and getting much quicker in one lap. And he just looks more comfortable than ever. And I genuinely think he's going to be really fucking hard to beat. So
Yeah. Did you get a chance to punch Elliot York in the face for his comments on after
No,
the flag?
I haven't seen him since I got back yet. Actually, maybe I'll message him now and go for a beer and whack him.
For everybody who doesn't know, I believe Lewis and Elliot were talking about Aprilia, but I'm not quite sure. They were talking about something.
Yamaha, I think.
And Yamaha, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
And you had some idea there, which we as a spectator didn't see or didn't hear. But Lewis said that's Jack's idea. And Elliot says, yeah, he's right. That's probably like the only good idea he ever had or something like this. So.
Yeah, I know. Cheeky fucker.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you a lot for joining me. It was great to talk to you again. And I really hope that this season you'll get more chance to work on the air, because I think you're doing a phenomenal job. I really appreciate the After the Flag stuff. And I really appreciate that you take your time to talk with me about basically the same stuff you talked about on After the Flag already. So yeah, thank you very much. And I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great evening, and I hope you and Elliot can settle things.
Yeah, we will do. No, I appreciate the kind words. I'm actually going to be commentating on Moto E this year, so you'll hear
nice.
a little bit more of me for all the 12 people that watch Moto E. So there you go.
I watched Moto E in Assen once when I was there live, and it was such a crazy good race. But the problem for me is it's so busy already on Sunday or Saturday as well. Then you still have to watch something like the Rookies Cup and Moto E, and there's like a point where it's too much, you know.
Yeah,
but
no, I can agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I wish you a lot of fun this season commentating Moto E. Maybe I'll watch a race or two. And I wish you a great time until the season starts.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Hope all's well.
Goodbye.
Speak to you.